The cold silence of deep space was broken only by the hum of the ship's engines, a rhythmic pulse that was both comforting and unnerving. Captain Elena Rhodes stood at the bridge's command console, her hands resting lightly on the controls. The glow of distant stars filled the viewports, but her mind was elsewhere. Earth's council had denied any involvement in the Solara situation, citing political and resource limitations. Yet here they were, aboard the Wraith, a stealth frigate designed for covert missions, slipping through the fringes of known space like a shadow in the night. "Captain," came the voice of Lieutenant Marcus Voss, a tall, sharply dressed officer with piercing blue eyes. "We've entered the Solara system, the signal still active." Rhodes nodded, her jaw tight. "How much longer until we reach the colony?" 5 hours, assuming no detours, Voss replied, adjusting the ship's course. "The distress signal's been broadcast for nearly 24 hours. Whoever sent it's either dead or in hiding by now." "And still no response from the council?" Rhodes asked, glancing toward the large communications display. The screen blinked with a constant, urgent signal from the colony. But Earth had remained silent, unwilling to commit resources to what they saw as a doomed mission. Their decision weighed heavily on Rhodes's heart. She knew this mission was about far more than saving Solara. "No response," Voss confirmed, aside from their official stance. "They think we're acting on our own initiative. This isn't exactly approved." Not surprised, Rhodes muttered, her eyes narrowing. "Those colonies have been on their own for too long. They've been written off by everyone except us." She turned to the crew gathered behind her, a mix of seasoned soldiers, scientists, and engineers. Each member of the Silent Guardians was handpicked for this mission, each bearing the weight of their individual burdens. But together, they formed a deadly unit that would take on the impossible. She knew they were ready, but was she? Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft ping of the communications console. A new message had arrived, a brief transmission from Solara's surface, corrupted but still discernible. It was unmistakable, the desperate cry for help. "Please, if anyone hears, Solara, they're coming, too many of them." Rhodes's heart sank. The voice, strained and full of fear, was unlike any she'd ever heard. There was a sense of finality in it, an urgency that reached into her very soul. The message was from a Solaran officer, Captain Alan Thorne, the colony's last known commanding officer. "Patch it through to the team," Rhodes ordered, her voice firm. As the signal filtered through the static, it took on a grating, raw quality. Her eyes widened as the message became clearer. "We are under attack. The Voral Dominion. They found us. We've tried everything. There's nothing left. You have to fight for us. We can't hold on much longer." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving an echo of despair. Rhodes stared at the screen, a cold shiver running down her spine. The Voral Dominion were notorious for their brutal conquests and merciless occupation of any world they targeted. But this wasn't a simple invasion, it was an extermination. She turned to her crew, the weight of the situation settling heavily on her shoulders. "They're not here to take Solara," Rhodes said, her voice low but firm. "They're here to erase it." Voss nodded grimly. "So what's the plan, Captain?" "We're not just saving a colony," Rhodes replied, her gaze hardening. "We're going to expose the truth. The Council's involvement with the Dominion runs deeper than we thought. This is bigger than Solara, and if we don't act, it's only a matter of time before the same thing happens to every human settlement out here." Her words struck like a hammer to the chest. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared to speak. They had all seen the results of the Dominion's attacks before. Entire worlds turned to ash in a matter of weeks. Solara, if it fell, would be the first domino in a chain that could spell the end of humanity's tenuous foothold in the galaxy. As the Wraith sailed deeper into the Solara system, Captain Rhodes knew that this mission would define them all. The Silent Guardians weren't just going to fight for survival, They were going to fight to protect what humanity had left. No one else was coming. It was up to them. And Rhodes was determined that they wouldn't fail. The Wraith cut through the darkness like a ghost, its sleek black hull designed to blend seamlessly with the void. The crew worked in near silence, each member absorbed in their duties. Outside, the stars flickered with a cold indifference as they passed through asteroid fields and the remnants of dying systems, their once lush planets reduced to barren rocks. Solara was just ahead, but Captain Rhodes knew that the worst was yet to come. ETA to Solara, Captain. Voss's voice broke through the quiet, but there was an edge of tension in it. He was good at hiding it, but Rhodes could tell he was worried. They all were. 5 minutes, she replied, eyes scanning the tactical readouts. Prepare for possible contact. We're going in blind. No sign of Vorel ships yet, but that could change at any moment. As the ship approached the Solara system, the sensors suddenly lit up with a warning. A large object, a warship, was emerging from behind a nearby moon. It wasn't a Dominion vessel, but it was undeniably hostile. Pirates? Asked Lieutenant Juno Kim, the ship's chief engineer, eyes narrowing as the unidentified ship came into view. It was too large for a mere raider, with a heavy-looking hull and multiple weapons platforms bristling on its surface. Rhodes cursed under her breath. No, not pirates. They've been using mercenaries to hunt down anyone who dares defy them. She turned to Voss. Full evasive maneuvers. If they're after us, we can't afford a fight. The Wraith dipped and spun, veering off its direct course to Solara. The mercenary ship followed, matching their speed and trajectory. Firing thrusters, Kim called, adjusting the ship's momentum to avoid a potential weapons lock. The ship's low-profile design allowed them to slip past most sensor sweeps, but the mercenaries' tracking systems were more advanced than anticipated. Suddenly, the ship rocked, the metal groaning as weapons fire clipped the Wraith's starboard side. The shields flared, flickering under the strain, and the ship's alert klaxon screamed through the bridge. Shields holding at 60%, Kim reported. Hull integrity still intact, but we need to make a move, Captain. They won't stop unless we take them out. Rhodes gripped the armrest of her command chair, her mind working at lightning speed. The decision weighed heavily on her. If they fought, the noise would alert the Dominion. If they ran, they might not make it to Solara in time. There was no perfect solution. Evasive pattern Delta, she barked. Voss, plot a course that'll put us in the asteroid field. We'll use it for cover. The ship's engines roared as it veered toward the dense belt of asteroids that surrounded Solara's outer rim. The mercenary ship followed, weapons fire continuing to bombard them, but the asteroids gave them enough cover to avoid a direct hit. For now. But the chase was far from over. Enemy ships locking weapons, Voss warned, his knuckles white on the controls. They're going for a torpedo launch. Full power to aft shields, Rhodes ordered, her voice calm but fierce. Kim, I need that targeting jammer online. Now. Kim's fingers flew across her console. Done. The jammer's active. That should confuse their targeting systems long enough for us to get away. Another round of fire erupted from behind, but this time, the enemy's missiles veered off course, spinning wildly into space. Rhodes couldn't afford to waste time. She knew this was only the beginning. The Dominion's forces were still out there, waiting. But first, they had to deal with the immediate threat. We'll take them head-on, she said, her voice cold with resolve. Kim, can you overcharge the forward laser cannon? Kim's eyes widened. It's risky. Overcharging could overload the entire system. Do it anyway. The Wraith angled toward the mercenary ship, shields barely holding as they took another hit. With their course set, Kim's hands worked furiously, setting the laser cannon to maximum output. The ship's core pulsed with energy, and Rhodes braced herself for the next move. As the mercenary ship fired another round of torpedoes, the Wraith shot forward, diving into the asteroid field and cutting through the dense rock. It was a gamble. The mercenaries had the advantage in open space, but Rhodes knew the asteroid field like the back of her hand. It was tight, dangerous, and full of hidden caves and pockets where they could slip in unnoticed. Now, Rhodes commanded. The energy in the ship surged as Kim unleashed a massive burst from the forward cannon. The beam tore through the enemy ship's shields, cutting deep into its hull. The mercenaries returned fire, but their shots were wild, scattering against the rocks as their targeting systems went haywire. Direct hit to their engines, Kim confirmed, her voice strained but triumphant. They're dead in the water. Their power's gone. Rhodes nodded, breathing a sigh of relief. But the moment was fleeting. The battle had only just begun. They still had to reach Solara, and the Dominion's forces would be on their heels before long. "Stay sharp," she said, her eyes narrowing. "We're not out of this yet." The Wraith drifted silently through the asteroid field, the faint hum of its damaged systems blending with the creaking of its hull. Rhodes paced in front of the main viewport, her thoughts as fragmented as the field surrounding them. They had bought themselves some time, but the mercenaries weren't the real threat. They were just a distraction. "We need to make it to Solara before the Dominion knows we're here," Rhodes muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Her crew had already proven themselves time and time again, but this mission felt different, more personal, more dangerous. The stakes were higher, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. "We're almost through the belt," Voss said, his voice cutting through the silence of the bridge. "Solara's orbit is just ahead. I've scanned for Dominion ships, nothing yet. But that could change the moment we drop out of this field." "Keep us low," Rhodes ordered. "We can't afford to make ourselves a target." Kim glanced over her shoulder, her fingers moving with practiced ease on her console. "The forward laser took a lot out of the power core, but we're holding steady. I've rerouted auxiliary power to the stealth systems. We'll stay hidden long enough to get close." The crew nodded, their faces a mix of determination and anxiety. They were on the edge, balancing between invisibility and imminent discovery. Every moment that passed felt like they were teetering on the edge of a cliff. As the asteroid field began to thin, the ship's sensors detected a small fleet of ships, some mercenary, some unidentified. They were in orbit around Solara, just as the distress signal had indicated. Rhodes's chest tightened. She couldn't see the Dominion's flagship, but she knew it was out there, waiting. The presence of mercenaries was a sign that something much darker was afoot. "We're not going in blind," Rhodes said, her voice hard with resolve. "Kim, run a full scan of the colony. I want to know exactly what we're walking into." Kim worked quickly, her eyes flicking from one screen to another. "The colony's shields are still active, but they're weak, barely holding at 30%. I'm detecting signs of intense bombardment, but no major casualties reported, yet." "Which means they're toying with them," Rhodes replied, fists clenched. "The Dominion isn't just here to conquer, they're sending a message." Voss stepped forward, his eyes darkened with concern. "Captain, we've only got one shot at this. If we don't act fast, the Dominion will crush Solara and any hope of resistance." Rhodes met his gaze, then looked out at the looming silhouette of Solara. The colony, a dusty world that had once been a symbol of humanity's expansion, was now a dying ember, caught in the crossfire of a war no one had asked for. "Take us in, Voss," Rhodes ordered, "full stealth mode. Get us in close, and then we'll make our move." The Wraith surged forward, its systems humming as the stealth field activated, rendering the ship nearly invisible to enemy sensors. The crew sat in tense silence, only the soft clicks of the instruments and the occasional hum of machinery breaking the stillness. Minutes passed like hours. Rhodes couldn't help but feel the weight of the mission pressing on her. She knew Solara was only one of many colonies left to fend for itself. If the Dominion's attack succeeded here, it would embolden them to continue their onslaught across human space. The silence of the past years would be shattered by the roaring wave of conquest. "There," Kim said sharply, pointing to a flashing red icon on the screen. "I've located the primary Dominion command ship in low orbit. It's heavily guarded by warships, probably the ones they hired to take Solara." Voss's hand tightened on the controls. "We're too close for comfort, Captain. If we get any nearer, we'll be detected." Rhodes took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the enemy fleet. "We need to get on the ground. Now." "Captain," Voss said, hesitating, "I don't think we can take that ship out with what we have. We'll need reinforcements, more firepower." Rhodes locked eyes with him. "We don't have reinforcements, Voss. We're all they've got." Her voice softened, but there was no mistaking the fire behind it. "We're the Silent Guardians. We protect the forgotten, even when no one else will. We fight for what's left." The ship crept closer, skimming the edge of Solara's atmosphere. Through the viewport, Rhodes could see the sprawling colony, its once thriving cities now darkened with the smoke of battle. A large portion of the colony's outer defenses had already been destroyed, the wreckage of shattered ships floating in the atmosphere like debris from a forgotten dream. Rhodes's heart hardened. The fate of Solara was hanging by a thread, and it was up to her and her crew to sever that thread or save it. "Prepare to deploy," Rhodes ordered. "We'll get in, make our presence known, and then we'll break them wide open." The crew braced themselves as the Wraith dove into the colony's atmosphere, and for a fleeting moment, Rhodes felt the overwhelming weight of their mission. The silence that had once enveloped them was about to shatter into chaos. And there was no turning back now. The Wraith shuddered as it descended into Solara's atmosphere, the tension thick on the bridge. Rhodes kept her eyes fixed on the rapidly approaching colony, the sprawling lights of the city below fading into the smoky haze of battle. The ship's engines strained under the pressure, but the stealth field was holding strong. For now, they remained undetected, a ghost in the storm. Entering the drop zone, Voss called out, his voice steady despite the mounting danger. The ship's hull groaned, the friction of the atmosphere pushing them toward their destination. "We'll be close to the Dominion Command Center. We have to get in, get the intel, and get out before they realize we're here." "I know," Rhodes replied, gripping the armrest of her chair. "This is the point of no return. Once we land, there's no guarantee we'll get off the ground again." Kim, her face pale from the strain of keeping the ship's systems running at maximum capacity, turned from her console. "I've calibrated the thrusters for a rapid descent. We'll be down in under 2 minutes. But, Captain, we're running on borrowed time. If they detect us now, we won't make it out alive." Rhodes nodded. The risk was immense, but the fate of Solara, and perhaps countless other colonies, depended on what they were about to do. "We'll make it out," she said firmly, though even she couldn't help but wonder if she was lying to herself. The Wraith dropped like a stone, streaking through the smoky clouds toward the colony's surface. As they neared their landing zone, the faint outline of the Dominion Command Center came into view, an imposing structure of steel and concrete, surrounded by a ring of warships and mercenary fighters. "We've got a window," Voss said, his hands working furiously on the controls. "If we time this right, we can land right outside their perimeter." Rhodes leaned forward, her gaze intense. "Do it." Voss adjusted the ship's trajectory, threading the needle between towering buildings and enemy ships. Below, the faint glow of the colony's remaining civilian districts flickered, barely alive. As they closed in on the landing site, Rhodes noticed the large metal gates of the Dominion's base slowly closing, as if they were preparing for a complete lockdown. "Brace for impact," Voss warned. The ship jolted violently as the landing thrusters fired, forcing the Wraith to touch down on the cracked, barren ground with a loud thud. The ship's systems immediately began to power down to reduce their energy signature, and the crew scrambled to prepare for the infiltration. Rhodes stood, straightening her uniform, her mind already shifting into combat mode. She pulled her blaster from its holster and glanced at her team. "We go in fast, get what we need, and then we get out. If the Dominion finds us before we leave, we'll have no choice but to fight our way out." Kim was already pulling on her tactical gear, eyes narrowed in concentration. "We're in their backyard now, Captain. The minute we step out of this ship, we'll be on their radar." "We don't have a choice," Rhodes replied. "We can't sit here and wait for reinforcements. It's just us." Voss, who had been scanning the area, gave a nod. "Ground defenses are light on this side, but they have patrols moving every few minutes. If we stay low and stick to the shadows, we might have a shot." The crew quickly suited up, weapons in hand, and prepared for the worst. The air was thick with the scent of burning debris, and the distant sounds of gunfire echoed faintly. They were on enemy soil now, and every second counted. Rhodes led the way, stepping out of the ship first and scanning the perimeter. The colony was eerily quiet, the once thriving industrial zones now reduced to abandoned structures and half-destroyed buildings. It was as if the entire planet had been forgotten by the universe, an outpost left to rot in the void. They moved quickly and silently, sticking to the shadows and using the wreckage for cover. The tall, jagged ruins of what had once been a major port city now loomed like silent sentinels, watching over them as they advanced. The command center was only a few hundred meters ahead, its stark, militarized walls standing tall and oppressive in the dim light of the twin suns. As they neared the entrance, the team paused, crouching low to avoid detection. Through a shattered window, Rhodes could see the movement of Dominion soldiers patrolling the perimeter. "We're close," she whispered. "Voss, you're on point. Kim, stay ready to breach. I'll take up the rear." They waited, breath held, as a patrol of 4 Dominion soldiers walked past them, their heavy boots echoing off the cracked pavement. Rhodes's heart raced, but her focus never wavered. The moment they passed, she motioned for the team to move. They crept forward, every movement calculated, until they reached the back of the command center. There, hidden in the shadow of a collapsed tower, a small door stood ajar, likely forgotten in the chaos of the battle. Kim quickly moved forward, planting a small explosive charge on the door's lock. "Ready," she muttered. Rhodes nodded, her pulse quickening. "Do it." The charge went off with a muffled pop, and the door creaked open. The team slipped inside, entering the heart of the Dominion's operations on Solara. Inside, the air was cool and sterile, a stark contrast to the devastation outside. But Rhodes knew that beneath this calm surface, a storm was brewing, one that would change everything. The silence inside the Dominion Command Center was oppressive. The walls, made of cold, metallic plating, seemed to close in on Rhodes and her team as they moved deeper into the heart of the facility. The only sound was the faint hum of machinery, the occasional clicking of their boots on the smooth, metallic floors. "Stay sharp," Rhodes whispered, her voice low and steady. "We don't know how much time we have before they realize we're here." The team moved in formation, staying in the shadows, their weapons drawn and eyes scanning every corner. The faint flicker of security lights illuminated their path, casting an eerie glow over the high-tech equipment scattered across the room. Monitors lined the walls, displaying maps of the colony and readouts of various systems, most of them marked with the ominous insignia of the Dominion. Kim, who had taken the lead in the infiltration, quickly moved toward a central terminal. Her fingers danced over the controls, bypassing security protocols with quick precision. The screen flickered for a moment, then came to life, displaying encrypted data feeds. Kim frowned as she studied the readout. "They're not just here for Solara," Kim muttered. "This goes deeper. They've been coordinating attacks on other colonies, multiple sectors, coordinated strikes. They've mapped out everything. This isn't a raid, it's a full-on campaign." Rhodes's stomach twisted. The Dominion wasn't just picking off isolated outposts. They were systematically dismantling the fragile network of humanity's colonies, crushing resistance before it could mount a real defense. If this was true, the Wraith's mission had just become much more urgent. "Can you access the command files?" Rhodes asked, her voice tense. "We need to know how many forces they have, what their next move is. We need intel." Kim nodded, her fingers moving with rapid efficiency across the terminal. "It's going to take a minute to decrypt the final layers of security. There's a lot of data buried in here." Voss, standing guard at the door, kept a sharp eye on the hallway outside. The soft click of his boots on the floor was the only indication of his agitation. "We don't have a minute, Kim. We need to move now." "Just a little longer," Kim said through gritted teeth, her eyes locked on the screen. "Got it. I'm in." The terminal screen changed, revealing a series of classified mission logs and strategic data. Kim quickly scanned through the information, her eyes moving faster than Rhodes could track. Her lips tightened as she read. "They're targeting a large cluster of colonies in the Tetrax sector, one of the most densely populated areas in the galaxy, and they've got reinforcements on the way. Their fleets are already mobilizing." Rhodes's blood ran cold. The Tetrax sector wasn't just a strategic point, it was home to millions of civilians. If the Dominion had their sights set on it, the implications were terrifying. "We need to stop them," Rhodes said, her voice low and resolute. "This isn't just about Solara anymore. We've got to warn the other colonies. They can't fight back if they don't know what's coming." Kim nodded, already compiling the data into a portable file. "I'm sending the intel to the Wraith. It'll be encrypted, but if we can get back to the ship, we can transmit it to the rest of the fleet." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. Footsteps, heavy, fast, Dominion soldiers. "Damn it," Voss hissed, pulling his blaster from its holster. "We've got company." Rhodes grabbed Kim by the shoulder, pulling her to her feet. "Get the file. Voss, you and I hold the line. Kim, get to the ship." Kim hesitated, her eyes wide. "Captain, I can't leave you." "Go," Rhodes barked. Kim's expression flickered with indecision, but she nodded and bolted for the door, her footsteps fading into the distance as she disappeared into the shadows. Rhodes and Voss moved to the far side of the room, pressing their backs against the walls. The sounds of approaching boots grew louder, and Rhodes's grip tightened on her blaster. They had to buy Kim enough time to get back to the Wraith. Once she transmitted the intel, it was only a matter of time before the Dominion would hunt them down. But Rhodes wouldn't let that happen, not while there was still breath in her body. The door slid open, and 4 Dominion soldiers stormed into the room, their weapons drawn and scanning for any signs of resistance. Their faces were cold and unfeeling, the same emotionless mask Rhodes had seen too many times on the faces of the Dominion soldiers. They were here for one thing, to eliminate anything that stood in their way. Rhodes didn't hesitate. She and Voss opened fire simultaneously, taking out the first 2 soldiers in quick succession. Their bodies crumpled to the floor with sickening thuds. "Go," Rhodes shouted as she dove behind a piece of debris, using it for cover. Voss followed suit, his blaster firing with deadly precision. The remaining soldiers scrambled for cover, returning fire in sharp bursts. The room erupted into chaos, the flashing lights of gunfire illuminating the otherwise sterile space. Rhodes's heart pounded in her chest, but her focus never wavered. She needed to make sure Kim was safe. The gunfire grew louder, more frantic. But through the din, Rhodes could hear the sound of footsteps retreating. Kim was gone. Rhodes allowed herself a brief moment of relief. They had bought her the time she needed. "Let's move," Voss said, his voice steady but urgent. "We're not done yet." Together, they fought their way out of the room, moving quickly through the labyrinthine corridors of the command center. The clock was ticking. Every second brought them closer to their only chance at stopping the Dominion. And time was something they didn't have much of. Rhodes and Voss pressed forward through the cold, sterile halls of the Dominion Command Center, the echoes of their footsteps a sharp reminder that they were running out of time. The sounds of the battle behind them began to fade, replaced by the distant hum of the facility's power systems. Despite the chaos they had just left behind, the facility felt eerily calm. "We've got to reach the extraction point," Voss said, his voice low and tense as he moved swiftly by her side. "Kim's already transmitting the data, but if we don't get out of here soon, it won't matter." "I know," Rhodes replied, her voice sharp as she scanned the dark corridors ahead. "We can't let them shut us down now. This data is the key to stopping them. The moment they realize what we've stolen, they'll come after us with everything they've got," Voss finished for her, "and they won't stop until we're dead." Rhodes didn't need any more reminders of the danger they were in. The Dominion wasn't known for mercy, and their retaliation would be swift and brutal. But she couldn't focus on that now. The mission came first. They turned a corner, heading toward the lower levels of the base where their ship was waiting. The air grew colder, the faint smell of burning metal still lingering in the shadows. As they approached a junction, a sudden burst of static crackled through their comms. "Captain, it's Kim," came her voice, strained but clear. "I've sent the intel. The Wraith is ready for takeoff, but we've got incoming. Dominion forces are already locking down the outer perimeter. You'll have to hurry if you want to make it." "We're on our way," Rhodes said, her heart racing. "Stay where you are. We'll be there in 2 minutes." The comms crackled again, but this time there was nothing more than silence. Rhodes and Voss exchanged a glance before quickening their pace. "They're going to try to lock us in," Voss muttered under his breath. "They won't let us leave without a fight." "Not this time," Rhodes replied, her voice resolute. She knew the stakes, and she wasn't going to let the Dominion take this victory from them. Not after everything they had fought for. As they neared the last corridor before the hangar, the sound of heavy boots echoed in the distance. The unmistakable hum of energy shields and weapons charging was growing louder with each passing second. They were running out of time. "Get ready," Rhodes whispered. "On my mark, we move. Fast." Voss nodded, his hand tightening around the grip of his blaster. His eyes flickered to the hallway ahead, calculating the risk with every step they took. He knew they didn't have the luxury of being careful anymore. Rhodes held her breath. She glanced once more at the dimly lit hallways, knowing the odds were stacked against them. Humanity's will to fight was not so easily extinguished. The Dominion had underestimated just how far Rhodes and her crew would go to protect the colonies they had sworn to defend. With a sudden burst of motion, Rhodes broke into a sprint, Voss right behind her. They rounded the corner, only to find themselves face to face with a squad of Dominion soldiers. The unmistakable glow of their combat armor illuminated the hallway in harsh blue light. "Stop right there," one of the soldiers barked, raising his blaster. Rhodes didn't hesitate. She fired first, her blaster discharging with a crack. The first soldier collapsed, his weapon clattering to the floor. Voss was right behind her, opening fire and taking down another 2 soldiers before they could react. The remaining 2 soldiers dove for cover, returning fire. "Take cover," Rhodes shouted, diving behind a pillar as blaster fire ricocheted off the walls around them. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her focus never wavered. She couldn't afford to be distracted now. Voss moved quickly, using his agility to outmaneuver the soldiers. He fired off a quick shot that took down another, leaving only one left. The last soldier was retreating, making a break for the door that led to the hangar. "No you don't," Voss yelled, and with a well-aimed shot, he hit the soldier in the back, sending him crashing to the floor. "Clear," Rhodes said, her voice tight as she stood up and dusted herself off. "Let's move." The 2 of them pushed forward, rushing down the final stretch of the corridor toward the hangar. As they reached the entrance, they could hear the hum of the Wraith's engines warming up, the soft roar of its thrusters echoing through the hangar bay. Kim was already inside, her hands flying over the ship's controls. "We've got company," Voss shouted, pointing to the far end of the hangar where several Dominion ships were rapidly closing in. Rhodes didn't waste a second. "Kim, power up the engines. Get us out of here now." Kim's fingers flew over the controls, and the Wraith's engines roared to life. The ship's shields flickered, activating just in time to absorb the first round of incoming fire. Rhodes took a deep breath. They had made it, but the mission wasn't over yet. The data was safely transmitted, but the Dominion wouldn't stop hunting them now. The battle had only just begun. "Hold on tight," Rhodes said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We're going to make it out of here." With a sudden burst of speed, the Wraith shot out of the hangar, leaving the Dominion command center behind. But the real fight was only beginning. The colonies were still in danger, and they wouldn't stop until the Dominion's grip was broken. The Wraith shot through the dark expanse of space, its sleek form cutting through the stars like a phantom. The hum of the engines resonated in Rhodes's chest, but it was the weight of their mission that occupied her thoughts. The Dominion might have lost the battle at the command center, but the war was far from over. With the stolen data in their hands, the fight to protect humanity's colonies was about to escalate in ways they hadn't even begun to imagine. "Kim, status report," Rhodes called out, her voice calm but strained. Her hands gripped the seat, knuckles white, as the ship swerved to avoid another burst of incoming fire from one of the Dominion ships still in pursuit. "Shield integrity holding, Captain," Kim responded, her fingers dancing over the control panel, adjusting course as the stars streaked past. "But we're not out of the woods yet. The Dominion won't stop hunting us until we're dead or we're in their grasp. They've mobilized their entire fleet." Rhodes's eyes narrowed. The Dominion had resources they could throw at them, but humanity had something the Dominion could never replicate: resilience. The data Kim had transmitted would be their lifeline, but it also marked them as targets. The clock was ticking before the Dominion's fleet closed in and surrounded them. "We need to buy time," Rhodes said, leaning forward in her seat. "If they're tracking us, they'll expect us to run. We can't afford to be predictable." Voss, who had taken up position by the ship's weaponry, spoke up. "We've got enough firepower to give them a good fight, but we're running low on ammo, and the longer we wait, the more reinforcements they'll throw our way. I suggest we start thinking about a long-term plan, Captain." Rhodes shot him a grim look. "I know. The problem is, the moment we stop running, they'll know we've made our stand. But we can't keep dodging forever." Kim, who had been scanning the communications array, looked up. "Wait, I've got something. A distress beacon. It's coming from the nebula sector." Rhodes froze. "Nebula sector?" she repeated, her mind whirling. The nebula sector was home to several long-abandoned human colonies, places the Dominion had left untouched for years. They were practically forgotten, left to their own devices by both the Dominion and the New Alliance. If someone was broadcasting a distress signal from there, it could be a trap or an opportunity. "We can use it as cover," Rhodes said, her eyes flashing with sudden resolve. "If we head there, we might be able to shake the Dominion off our tail, at least for a while." Kim hesitated, her fingers hovering over the navigation console. "You're suggesting we fly directly into a dead zone? It's not exactly the safest option, Captain." "I'm not suggesting it, Kim," Rhodes replied, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I'm ordering it. If it's a trap, we'll deal with it. If it's not, we get the help we need. We've got no other choice." Voss, who had been listening in, let out a low whistle. "You're betting everything on a long shot, huh? Do you have a better idea?" Rhodes shot back, her tone sharp. Voss shrugged, his lips curling into a smirk. "Guess we don't have time to argue then. Let's do it." Kim nodded and rerouted the ship's course toward the nebula sector, the stars around them beginning to warp as the Wraith accelerated into faster-than-light travel. The minutes that followed felt like hours. The tension inside the ship was thick, every member of the crew waiting for the inevitable confrontation. The nebula sector wasn't just an empty void. It was filled with debris, ancient colonies, and the remnants of lost human civilizations. There were rumors about the area, a dead zone, they called it. A place that didn't fit into anyone's maps, ignored by both the Dominion and the Alliance. If they could lose their pursuers in there, they might find an edge. But the closer they got to the nebula sector, the more Rhodes's sense of unease grew. Something about this didn't feel right. The distress signal could be genuine, but it could also be a lure to drag them deeper into the Dominion's web. "Brace yourselves," Kim called from the cockpit. "We're coming in on the edge of the nebula. Low visibility. I'll need everyone on their toes." Rhodes nodded, her gaze flickering to Voss. "Stay sharp. If the Dominion's already here, they could be waiting." As the Wraith approached the outer fringes of the nebula, the star seemed to blink out, swallowed by the dark cloud of gas and cosmic debris. The ship's sensors went haywire, the visual display shifting from crisp starlight to a blinding fog of interference. Kim worked furiously at the controls, adjusting course, trying to pierce through the thickening haze. "We're entering the heart of the nebula," she said. "I can't guarantee the Wraith will stay undetected for long. It's too easy for something to hide in here." Voss gripped his weapon tighter. "Then we make sure we don't give them the chance." Suddenly, the comms flared to life, a voice crackling through the static. It was faint, distorted, but it was unmistakable. "This is Colonel Matthews of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. We need assistance. The Dominion." The signal cut out before the transmission could finish. Rhodes's heart skipped a beat. A military fleet, stranded in the heart of the nebula. They might be the reinforcements they'd been hoping for. "Get us closer," Rhodes ordered. "That distress signal is our lifeline. If it's real, we have our army." But as they drifted further into the nebula, something felt off. There was an undercurrent of danger, a feeling that whatever awaited them in the heart of the nebula might be far worse than they could imagine. The Wraith drifted deeper into the heart of the nebula, its sleek frame barely visible against the swirling mist of gas and cosmic dust. The air inside the ship was thick with tension. The crew was on edge, the unsettling silence only broken by the low hum of the engines and the faint crackle of static from the comms. They had followed the distress signal, hoping for a lifeline, but the closer they got to its source, the more Rhodes's unease grew. Approaching the signal's origin point, Kim announced, her hands steady on the controls as the stars disappeared completely, replaced by a swirling mass of swirling nebula clouds. "I don't like this," Voss muttered from his seat, scanning the darkened void outside the ship's viewport. "Too quiet, too many places to hide." Rhodes didn't respond immediately. She didn't need to say anything. Voss's instincts were right. The nebula was a trap waiting to be sprung. The distress signal had been too convenient, too perfect. No transmission that clear, that direct, came without a price. Kim adjusted the ship's sensors, trying to pierce the thick fog of interference. "I'm getting something," she said after a beat, her voice tight with focus. "There's a fleet, just as the signal said. But they're not responding. No comms, no movement. Just ghost ships." Rhodes's gut churned. The fleet. It should have been their salvation, but now it felt more like a mausoleum. "Do we approach?" Voss asked, his tone grave. "Keep it slow," Rhodes said, her mind racing through possibilities. If the fleet had been stranded, it could have been due to an attack, either from the Dominion or from something worse. They couldn't afford to make themselves a target. Not now, not with everything on the line. The Wraith crept closer, and the outlines of several large ships began to take shape through the mist, a patchwork of broken hulls and drifting wreckage. They looked like a fleet that had been abandoned in a hurry. No signs of life, no signs of struggle. "Something doesn't add up," Rhodes muttered, narrowing her eyes. "Why are these ships just sitting here? There should be a fight. Damaged ships, bodies, anything. But it's all too quiet." Suddenly, the comms crackled to life again, but this time, the voice was cold, empty, and devoid of any trace of humanity. "Welcome, Captain Rhodes." The voice echoed through the Wraith's speakers, deep and mechanical, as if coming from the very depths of space itself. Kim's hand flew to the comms controls, but the voice continued. "You've done well to come this far, but I regret to inform you that this is where your journey ends." Rhodes's heart skipped a beat. She knew that voice. It was the voice of the Dominion's new warlord, an entity that had been at the heart of the Dominion's campaign to crush resistance. It wasn't just any soldier. It was a machine, a remorseless, intelligent weapon that had been turned loose on the galaxy. "You've interfered with my plans for the last time," the voice continued, its tone dripping with malice. "All your efforts were for nothing. You've been walking into my trap from the very beginning." Voss cursed under his breath. "They've been watching us the entire time. The distress signal, everything, it was all designed to draw us here." Rhodes's mind raced. There had to be a way out, a way to turn the tables. But the warlord's words were sinking in. The trap had been set, and they had walked right into it. The nebula around them seemed to thicken, the stars swallowed whole by the dark mass. The wreckage of the fleet appeared even more ominous now, as if the ships themselves were part of a larger, darker design. As the Wraith edged closer to the ghost fleet, Rhodes saw movement. Shadows slipping through the broken ships, silent as death. Now, the voice echoed again, this time colder. "Let us see how long you last." And then the attack came. From the depths of the wrecked fleet, hidden vessels emerged, stealth ships with weapons far more advanced than anything the Wraith could handle. They moved silently, weapons charging, and before Rhodes could give the order to evade, the first wave of fire hit the Wraith. The hull groaned under the impact, sparks flying from the control panels as alarms blared throughout the ship. "Shields at 60%, Kim shouted, struggling to maintain control of the ship as it rocked violently. "They've got us cornered." "Fight back," Rhodes barked. "Voss, take out those damn ships." Voss was already moving, taking his position at the weapons bay and firing back with a vengeance. But even as he unleashed the Wraith's weapons, the enemy ships were too fast, too precise. For every hit they landed on the enemy, it felt like the Wraith took two in return. "Hold steady," Rhodes shouted, gripping the edge of her seat as the ship lurched again, narrowly avoiding another direct hit. "Kim, get us out of here. Full thrusters now." Kim didn't hesitate. With a sharp jolt, the Wraith shot forward, the engines roaring as they blasted toward the heart of the nebula, hoping to lose their pursuers in the cosmic storm. But even as they escaped the first wave of fire, Rhodes knew this wasn't over. The Dominion's warlord was relentless, and they would stop at nothing to destroy them. The data they had was the key to the colony's future, and now they were more valuable than ever.